About the crisis in Syria now, as the international community decides how to respond to President Assad's deadly gas attack on Tuesday. Will Syrians welcome President Trump's retaliatory airstrike, or do they fear more bombardment from the skies because of it, just from a different source? We can speak now to the co-founder of the Syrian Solidarity Campaign, Abdulaziz Almashi. Thanks very much for your time. So that should be the first question, I suppose. Would you like the US to get more involved? Would Syrian people like the US to get more involved militarily, or will it just make things worse, or certainly not better?
Well, the Syrian regime have been committing atrocities and war crimes against the Syrian people right since the start of the revolution. And we have asked the international community to take their responsibility to protect the life of civilians in Syria. So as a Syrian, I do welcome any actions that has the protection of civilians in its core. And we oppose any intervention or any action that doesn't protect the life of civilians. I do welcome the recent missile strikes from the Americans, because I hope that kind of action will stop Assad from using the chemical weapon again against the Syrian people. I wish if Barack Obama did the same back in 2013. If he did, then we wouldn't have seen the images of the children of Khan Sheikhoun choking to death.
There is the possibility, though, like you alluded to, that strikes by the US, by Western-backed powers, could make things worse. In fact, we're hearing a joint statement from the Joint Command Center grouping the Russia, Iran and their allies that's saying they will now respond to any aggression after that US attack. That, in fact, the US attack is crossing red lines for them. That doesn't sound like it would deter President Assad. Russia have a lot of skin in the game there, and it could in fact make things a lot worse for civilians.
And that's why the rest of the international community must take their responsibility to uphold the international law in Syria. Russia is part of the crime against the Syrian people. The Russians have been committing war crimes in Aleppo and in other parts of Syria. And the international community must sanction Russia, and Russia must be isolated, as well as Iran. We live in this world with the international law, and the international law shouldn't be crossed neither by the Russians, nor by the Iranians, nor by anyone else. And that's why the Americans, the British, the French, and the rest of the international community must step up to protect the people of Syria and to uphold the international law.
So what do you think the future should be for Syria? I assume President Assad nowhere near power, but then we have this situation where the US wouldn't particularly like to see an Islamic-led regime or state in Syria, and the Russians equally don't want to see that.
Well, this is the narrative of the Western leaders and the Western media. In Syria, when the people started a peaceful revolution, they didn't say we're going to replace the dictatorial regime with a fanatical ideology like ISIS. We want a democratic Syria where all Syrians can live in peace and united. We don't accept Assad, and we don't accept ISIS, and we don't accept Al-Qaeda. We want a Syria for all Syrians where people can live in peace.
And what about Donald Trump? Were you surprised at the fact that he did launch missiles at Assad's air bases? And would you, in fact, have liked to see him launch missiles at all Syrian air bases, not just the one?
For me, when Donald Trump targeted one airfield in Syria, that will reduce the number of barrel bombs that will be dropped on the Syrian civilians. I do welcome if the international community take their responsibility and stop the Syrian air forces from carrying out massacres in Syria, because in fact chemical massacres, the use of chemical weapons, wasn't the only war crimes that the Syrian regime has committed. The Syrian regime have been targeting hospitals, journalists. He dropped unguided bombs to target populated residential areas. Look at how the Syrian regime is treating the detainees in Syria. If I'm going to count the war crimes that have been committed by the Syrian regime, it will take a really long time to count them. The list is really long.
Okay, Abdulaziz Almashi, thank you very much from the Syria Solidarity Campaign. Appreciate your time. Time now to check the weather.